Hi everyone, Dan here, marketing manager at Blend, and I'm flying solo on a quick episode today because some huge news has come out. Basically, the Google algorithm has been leaked, and this leak is making waves across the marketing and SEO world right now. This is so interesting because Google search is probably one of the most secretive, closely guarded algorithms in the world. And to have a leak of this magnitude on our hands, it'll probably never happen again in history. So I can really understand all of the talk, all of the fuss, everything that's happening around this leak. And I just wanted to bring a quick episode to kind of give some insights on it, bring the news to you and some reactions and takeaways and things like that. Before we do get into all of the details of the leak and this episode, I just wanted to cover things off by saying that since the leak happened, Google have now spoken and given the following statement on the topic. So they said, "We would caution against making inaccurate assumptions about search based on out of context, outdated, or incomplete information. We shared extensive information about how search works and types of factors that our system weigh, while also working to protect the integrity of our results from manipulation." So, okay, from my perspective, I do totally understand why Google would come out and say that. This leak doesn't explain in full how Google ranks websites, but you can't really hide away from some of the information that's presented in this leak. And on that point, all of the information I'm going to be referring to throughout this podcast, I'll post in the description so you can also refer to it yourself and find out whatever you want to and dig in deeper wherever you want to too. So the things I'm going to refer to include Rand Fishkin's analysis from SparkToro, Mike King's analysis from iPullRank, Irfan Azimi's YouTube video explaining the leak and why, and the actual documentation itself, the leaked Google document on Hexdocs. But although if you're a developer, this might not mean too much to you. So let's dive into exactly what has been leaked, kind of break it down, and then have a look at some of the key takeaways from this leak. And I'll try and combine some of the takeaways from people that have already covered this topic, like Rand, like Mike, with some of my own thoughts and ideas around what this could mean for B2B marketers. And I'll try and break down some of the more technical aspects of it, like the actual algorithms being used and some of the other things that are mentioned throughout the analysis. If you are watching on video, apologies, I am going to be looking down and referring to a pretty comprehensive document that I've made, just because I don't want to say anything kind of out of turn and want to be as accurate as possible and cover things as best as possible. So let's dive in and see what we can find. So let's first address how this leak has actually come about. So Rand Fishkin, co-founder of Moz, SEO legend, a bit of an SEO godfather, everybody kind of in marketing itself, but definitely SEO would have heard of Rand. He's obviously now co-founder of SparkToro, so slightly detached from actually very detached, to be honest, from the SEO community compared to how he used to be. But he posted all of this information in an article on his website. Essentially, he had a leak from a source who was initially staying anonymous. This person has now come out and is Irfan Azimi, who is an SEO practitioner, a bit of an SEO guru essentially. So Irfan went to Rand with some pretty bold claims about Google, and he even Rand himself was pretty skeptical about these claims, but they were kind of so extraordinary and bold that Rand ended up jumping on a call with Irfan, who shared the actual documents with Rand, screen shared them, showed him everything that was there. And after you see the documentation, it's quite clear to see that this is actually the real deal. And potentially Irfan's claims were legitimate and credible. So who is Irfan Azimi and how did he get this detail himself? Well, since removing his anonymity and kind of exposing himself to the person who leaked this to Rand, Irfan has now posted a video on YouTube telling his side of the story where he explains why he decided to leak it. But there isn't too much detail in there about how he actually obtains the information, but we can kind of gather this for ourselves, which I'll talk about in a moment. I'll link his video in the description of this podcast. It's worth watching just to get his perspective on things too. So Rand talked about this all, by the way, during in his SparkToro article. I'm kind of just referencing pieces of it. Basically, during that call that Rand had with Irfan, Irfan states that Rand states, sorry, that Irfan showed the leak to Rand himself. You know, he was literally presenting the documents. So you've got over 2,500 pages of API documentation in there containing over 14,000 attributes that do appear to come from Google's internal content API warehouse, as they call it. And based on the comments, the document's comment history, the code was uploaded to GitHub on March 27th, 2024, and not removed until May 7th, 2024. It's also worth noting right now that the documentation here that was found doesn't show things like the weight that a particular element will have in the search algorithm, and it doesn't show which elements are used in the ranking system. But it really does show incredible details about the kinds of data that Google does collect. So then going back to Rand's article, he then basically was kind of saying how he went on to try and verify the legitimacy of the leak himself by sending the documentation to ex-Google friends who kind of did this for him now. So basically, all of the people that he asked who were ex-Googlers basically said that it looked legit and very much like other documentation they were used to seeing and using. They all, said a similar thing apart from one person who didn't want to comment. Rand then looped in Mike King, who's founder of iPullRank and a really highly respected person in the SEO space who most people would have heard of there. Mike also confirmed that this looked like a legit set of documents. And obviously, since this leak, Mike has also published a seriously in-depth analysis of the documents, and he kind of said he will continue to do so. Bear in mind, there's 2,500 technical documents here of API information that he needs to get through. So yeah, I'm pretty sure more will be made of this information in the coming months, and a lot more is going to come out of this in greater detail. So it's quite early days right now. Anyway, where this leak actually came from appeared to be GitHub. And I suppose the most credible explanation for this exposure is pretty much what Irfan told Rand. These documents were accidentally and briefly made public in GitHub, and it kind of looks accidental due to lots of the links in the documentation pointing to private GitHub repositories and internal pages on Google's corporate site that require specific Google credential logins. You're not going to publish something publicly like that on GitHub anyway. So looks definitely, accidental as far as we can see. And during the public period of these documents being on GitHub, the API documentation was spread to Hexdocs, and Hexdocs indexes public GitHub repositories. So at which point it was found on Hexdocs, found and circulated, I suppose, by other people like Irfan. So it looks like these documents were leaked from Google's API content warehouse. But what actually is that now? Well, according to Rand's ex-Googler sources, documentation like this exists on almost every Google team, explaining various API attributes and modules to basically help familiarize those people working on a project with the data elements that they have available. And we know this looks like real Google documentation because this leak also matches others that are public in GitHub repositories and also available on Google's Cloud API documentation. The notation style, formatting, even kind of like the process, module, feature, names and references are all similar or the same. So it looks pretty legit. Rand actually summed up the purpose of this kind of documentation really well. He said, think of this as instructions for members of Google's search engine team. It's like an inventory of books in a library, a card catalog of sorts, telling those employees who need to know what's available and how they can get it. So now we know a little bit more about the documentation itself that's been leaked. How do we know if Google actually uses everything listed in these documents? Well, the truth is, we can't actually be sure that they use it. The notes in the documents do correlate with changes that have been publicized in algorithms and things, but the most recent date actually found in the document is August 2023. So, no, we can't 100% say that. Because something is mentioned within this documentation, it's definitely a Google ranking factor. So I would probably question anybody doing so and making such claim like that. And I don't think people are yet. They're kind of adding this nuance around it. But what we do know is that it's a very, very, very strong indication, and probably the strongest indication that we ever had. Right, so now we understand where this data came from and its legitimacy. Let's get into some of the key takeaways from the leak. And within this, I'm going to try and focus on the things that I think our listeners will care about most. So that's mainly B2B companies in the US and Europe. As I go through this, for anybody watching the podcast on YouTube, as I run through these takeaways, wherever it's relevant to do so, I'll put screenshots of the attributes from the API documents and also any references that I make from Rand and Mike's post that support the point I'm making. So there's a bit more credibility and also some references in there to be aware of. Right, so now let's get into some of the takeaways. And number one is nav boost, and particularly nav boost's significance when it comes to having an impact on rankings, and way more significance than we previously thought. So nav boost provides search signals that rely heavily on user clicks. And just to kind of dive a bit more into what nav boost is, it's essentially Google's algorithm. It's kind of an advanced algorithm that sits on top of other Google algorithms, if that kind of makes sense. It enhances the user experience by improving quality of search results. So it essentially focuses on understanding the intent behind a query and then providing high relevancy and accurate results back to you. Obviously, you've got Google's main ranking system, which is called Mustang. This is still totally responsible for the core scoring and ranking of your page, but NavBoost can re-rank results based on click data. So Mustang responsible for getting results in the right order initially. NavBoost then comes in afterwards and can re-rank these, and it's looking at click data. That's a really important thing here, click data. Okay, so seeing references to NavBoost quite a lot actually in the documentation means that Google is using engagement and clicks as a ranking factor, even though they've publicly gone on record before and said this isn't the case. They have, gone out their way and said that CTR and things like that are not ranking factors. Google also appears to have ways to filter out clicks that they don't want to count in their ranking systems and include ones that they do. They also measure length of clicks, like pogo sticking. So when you go into a search page and click on a result and then either quickly click on the back button and go back to the search results page, or you continue reading that page, does seem to have a huge impact, or some impact, I should say, maybe not huge, but it's in here. It's got an impact on where your page ranks. So essentially, if somebody goes into the results and clicks on your page, stays for a good length of time, Google will see that your page is high quality and serving the needs of that query. Whereas if they go on, pogo stick straight back, literally after a couple of seconds, Google will think, oh, that result obviously wasn't very good. So let's reconsider the ranking next time, perhaps. So this is a really good point to say. There's a good reason now for looking at your website's UX potentially more than before and just ensuring it's optimal. Avoid that pogo sticking as much as possible. Provide that good experience, provide that relevant content where you can. So the next takeaway I've got is that Google favors Chrome clicks for site links. So it looks like Google likely measures the number of clicks on Chrome and uses that to measure which pages are most important. Those pages then become site links. And this is quite interesting because Google, there are claims now that Google actually created Chrome to get that full clickstream data that they didn't have before. Now that they have that, they use that to influence site links. So a site link is basically, if I was to go into Google and search for blend marketing, then underneath our main homepage, what other pages do we have in there? So, it might be like get in touch, about, whatever's in there essentially is a site link. And Google is looking at how you're interacting with a website on Chrome to determine which pages are most important to add to a site link. Interesting that they're using Chrome for that. So number 3, and I'm going to hold my hands up here and say I wasn't too aware this kind of thing was happening. I'm not, totally immersed in the SEO field. Obviously, like, I practice SEO. It's a big part of what we do, but a lot of the time you don't need this level of information or understanding of what's going on. But anyway, let's get into it. Number 3. So Google has a quality rating platform called EWOC. Now, this is essentially where Google contracts 12,000 search quality raters around the world who then evaluate and provide feedback on how they can improve search results. That's a real human. Yeah, a real human rating search results, basically. So they're strictly rating top search results in Google. So top websites, large volumes, essentially, is what we can take from this. And they use Google's quality radar guidelines, which are pretty comprehensive to rate these pages. And at a very, very high level, these quality raters are evaluating a page for things like page quality. That kind of includes things like website or author reputation. They're looking at EEAT as well. And to be honest, just the overall content quality that's on that page. They're also looking at things like if it meets the need of the searcher. Does the page relate back well? Does it match the intent of the query? Other ranking factors like, intent itself, spam, like, does the content look scraped? Things like that. So this is interesting because a lot of people knew that this existed, and I did a lot of research into what EWOC was and kind of how it worked. So yeah, people knew this stuff existed, but we didn't actually know how influential this was on Google's rankings. And obviously, I don't have the technical knowledge to understand the significance of quality ratings on rankings, but Rand does point out some parts of the documentation that look like they are referencing human rating scores. So it is looking like Google are using these EWOC ratings, these human rating scores, as part of their ranking factors. Number 4 is related to links. So Google seems to have tiers to classify the quality of links: low, medium, and high quality. If a link has a low volume of clicks, it's low quality. If a link has a high volume of clicks, it's high quality and will then obviously carry more equity. And this can be seen directly within the Google warehouse documentation too. And again, this stuff is kind of all stuff that we already knew, but just didn't kind of have confirmed. That is quite obvious, really, and common sense that a link on a high traffic page that's getting lots of clicks will carry more weight than a link with no clicks and really low traffic through it. So yeah, kind of obvious, but good to have our suspicions kind of confirmed by this documentation. Number 5, and this is a really big one and interesting one. Google does have an authority score. Yes, domain authority is real. Despite Google representatives like John Mueller coming out and saying, he said we don't have website authority score. He came out and actually said that. The documentation actually shows that Google has a feature called site authority, an attribute called that. So one could only think that this is similar to all of the SEO tools that give you a domain authority rating. Of course, we don't know exactly what makes up a site authority rating, but we have now seen that as an attribute within this document. We know that it exists, and we can kind of look elsewhere for the answers about what makes up website authority, what makes it good, that kind of things. So number 6, there is a sandbox after all in Google. What I mean by that is that when you start a new website and domain, Google then add it to their sandbox before it can be indexed. John Mueller again came out, said on Twitter, there is no sandbox. But in the documentation, there's an attribute called host age, which pretty much means that Google put your site in a holding period before they identify that it has enough quality to appear within their search results. Interestingly, on this one, Rand wrote about Google's sandbox all the way back in 2006. He spoke about how sites like MSN and Yahoo would rank a new website well before Google did, kind of looking at, they must have a sandbox period here. If it's being ranked in these other places before, why Google taking longer to do it? Well, now we can only assume that this is true. It's only taken 18 years to prove it. Number 7 is that Google appears to have a specific flag that indicates if a site is a small personal site. There's not actually a definition of what a small personal site is, but considering a lot of the flack and backlash that came from SEO people and small businesses that had been really, really heavily affected in a negative way by the helpful content update, perhaps they are using this feature to do something about that. Now we've got quite a lot of quick fire ones in there about like demotions and things like that, but these are all really worth knowing and interesting things. So my number 8 takeaway is the anchor mismatch thing. So basically, when a link does not match the target site it's linking to, the link is demoted on the calculations. So anchor mismatch is essentially the anchor text that you have within a link. So the text that appears within the HTML attribute, the code, what is that text essentially? If it's not relevant to the page that it's going to, then it's going to be demoted on the calculations. Again, this is kind of another one of those things that we already kind of knew, right? Like fairly common sense, self-explanatory, like send your link to the most relevant page possible because Google is looking for relevancy between links. We already knew that, but now it seems to be confirmed. Then we've got SERP demotion, so search engine results page demotion. And it looks like this is a signal indicating to demote something based on factors observed in the search results page itself. So this is potentially suggesting that if there's user dissatisfaction with the page, then it's going to be demoted. This is likely measured through clicks, like we said before about pogo sticking. So if somebody is on a SERP, they click through to a page, bounce straight off, potentially dissatisfied with that page and the result they received. So let's demote that, basically. Number 10, we've got freshness matters. So Google is looking at dates within this documentation. They've got byline dates, URL date, and on-page content date, essentially. So these dates, the freshness of your content is having an impact on search. So Google is favoring more recent content, more up-to-date content than older content. Again, stuff we already knew, like creating consistent content, new content, updating content is important and looks to be confirmed too. They also have something in here called nav demotion. Presumably, this demotion is kind of applying to pages that have poor navigation practices or have user experience issues. So again, this is kind of stuff we all know and we've been saying. Ensure your navigation is clear, intuitive, ensure your user experience flows well, is intuitive, and help your users find the information they need quickly and effectively. Looks like Google is potentially analyzing that and demoting you if it's poor. So number 12, I've forgotten if I keep saying numbers now or if I'm not saying numbers anymore. But anyway, we're at number 12. There is an exact match domain demotion. So by that exact match, I mean, basically, if you're stuffing your domain with keywords that exactly match what you're saying, like buy men's watches online here, or something to that extent, then Google is demoting you because it looks spammy, essentially. So now at 13, this is really interesting as well. Looks like font size of terms and links matter. So in the documentation, you can see that more weight is given to text that is larger in size within the page. So, perhaps after all, giving bold and underlines to your links does help, because it looks like Google are looking at those more closely within the documentation. And number 14, this is my last point, that page titles are still a really, really important factor. They're still measured heavily against queries. So this document indicates that there is a title match score. So the description here suggests that it's looking at how well the page title matches the query. So we know that, having that page title that you can set in your metadata is still something that Google is actively giving value to. So keep making sure that at the start of your page title, within your page title, you have your target keyword in there, and try and do it as soon as possible within that title for the best results. Okay, so a bit of a mixed bag in terms of takeaways there. Some in-depth things, some technical things like the way that nav boost is used in rankings, some quickfire things in terms of like how Google demotes pages within search results. But yeah, a really interesting documentation there. And I still can't believe a magnitude of this leak, a leak of this magnitude has got out. Sorry. Yeah, pretty insane. I would probably advise anybody to go and look at random Mike's articles for yourself. And if you do understand the API documents, go and look at those for yourself too, and just stay on top of this, see what else comes out, because it's really, really fascinating. And I just can't believe this is all available and just seems so legit and real right now. But yeah, some closing thoughts, I suppose, is that we already really know what we're doing when it comes to SEO. This data leak hasn't thrown out anything groundbreaking, anything out of the blue, anything that we were just so blown away by. And in fact, it's pretty much the opposite. It's just proven things that we already know. So all the best practices that are out there that have been proven, the experiments that have been done, the learnings that have been taken, the things that I've been doing, that we've been doing at Blend, for so long now, to get blogs, to get pages to rank highly first in Google, they're all true, and from now on, I'll probably be more inclined to trust any data-backed best practices that are published, that have good experiments within them. The data kind of proves the point, even if Google themselves don't come out and say explicitly that these things that you've tested here don't contribute to rankings. The fact that the data is there and it's proven it, I think, is good enough to kind of tell us that actually, this does help improve rankings in search. So I think, what can we do going forwards? What have we kind of learnt from this? I suppose just keep doing the things that we're doing to have success when it comes to SEO. Focus on creating consistent quality content that will attract those high quality links, and ensure that this content is being published on a website that has good user experience and keeps users engaged. Give Google all of the signals that it needs, all of those positive signals, to rank your website ahead of others. So that's it from me. Hopefully you enjoyed this episode. I know it's been a little bit different, just a solo episode. Hopefully you don't mind that too much. But yeah, I just had to bring some thoughts to the table on this. It's just crazy, like something of this magnitude we don't see often in B2B marketing and SEO. So really just wanted to get a podcast episode out there to share it with people that might not know about it yet, and to kind of just give some thoughts on what it means. If you did enjoy, I would appreciate a subscribe or a 5-star review. Yeah, just anything that helps, really. Maybe I'll do some more solo episodes like this if it has a good reaction. And, who knows? Let's stay up to date with this algorithm leak and potentially bring out some more episodes around what this means. So, yeah, thanks for tuning in, and I will catch you next time.